Hey everyone, I hope you're all doing well. So today I'm gonna be setting up the first month of this year in my new bullet journal, and if you haven't seen my setup for 2025 yet, I will leave a link in the description. Now for January I wanted to have a more wintry color palette, so I chose a cool grayish blue, a light pink, a light gray, and also a bright red shade for some contrast. And then I'm also going to be using this dark brown brush pen, the black Pilot Juice pen, and also a white gel pen for some of the accents. For the cover page, I went for a pretty simple but intricate looking theme with a bunch of leaves in blue and pink, as well as some red berries to create some more contrast, and I arranged them so that they make a pattern across the left side of the page. First, I just used some washi tape to tape off the border so that it's going to be nice and clean when I peel it off later on, and then I just tried to space out the leaves and the berries evenly, and I left a bit of space in between each element so that it doesn't look too crowded. I alternated between the blue and the light pink for the leaves, and then I also made them face in different directions, and I did the same thing for the berries and also sometimes added 4 instead of 3 berries just for a bit of variation. I did sketch out the rush shapes before, but I ended up not really sticking to them, and I just tried to fill the whole space pretty evenly, but there are still some bigger and some smaller gaps, so it definitely doesn't have to be perfect. I really love these sort of pattern themes because they make it very easy to decorate bigger and also smaller areas, and it also makes the spread look a lot more intricate even though the doodles themselves are super simple. For the stems of the berries I used that dark brown brush pen, but you could also just use a marker. This is just kind of what I had on hand. If you've watched some of my older videos, you might have noticed that I didn't make my usual mini calendar on the left page, and the reason is that this bullet journal has a lot fewer pages than my old one that I've been using, so it only has 128 instead of the usual 160, which means that I have to condense my spreads a bit more, but I actually don't mind at all because it means that I can use the space much more efficiently, and I also just love coming up with new ways of making my spreads. I know some people like to just split the year into 2 journals, which is also great if you tend to write a lot in your bullet journal or you just want a lot more space, but for me 1 journal is perfectly fine, and I don't like including a lot of additional spreads because they tend to stay empty, so I thought I would just try it out this year. Once everything was filled out, I wanted to go back and just define the leaves a bit more, so I used the felt tip side of the markers to make them a bit more pointy, and then I also used the white gel pen to add just a simple line down the center of the leaves to add a bit more detail, which I think really added a lot to this pattern. After finishing the whole pattern, I just peeled off the washi tape, and now I am left with a nice clean edge and I didn't have to be super careful. For the title, I used the same dark brown brush pen that I've been using for the stems of the berries, and I just wrote down January vertically, and then I also added 2 lines on the top and bottom with the light gray marker to add a bit of a border. On the next page, I wanted to include some planning sections for this month, so I first made a mini calendar in the top left corner, and I used the light gray as a background for the title, and then I just wrote January in black on top. Then I used the light pink for the weekdays on the top, and I wrote the dates in black as well, and I left a bit of space on the sides so that it's going to be centered with the other sections I'm going to be adding later on. So since my sections will be 10 spaces wide, I left 1.5 spaces empty on each side. For my sections, I first added a small leaf doodle in the top left corner, and then I used the light gray as a background again for the title and then wrote it on top in black. The first section is going to be dedicated to my events this month, and the rest of them will be for each week to plan out my tasks. I also added a small berry doodle in the bottom right corner to kind of balance out the section and add a bit more color. For the leaf doodle on the top, I alternate between the blue and the light pink so that all of the colors are incorporated in this page. For the other sections, I just wrote down week 1 through 4, and I will probably include the last week in week 4, but I kind of forgot to add it. Lastly, I just made the borders in black and I left out the parts for the title and the doodles, and the sections are 10 spaces wide and 10 spaces tall, including the titles, and then I left 2 spaces empty horizontally and 1 space vertically, although it might be a bit different in your journal because this one is a bit smaller than an A5, so it only has 24 grid spaces horizontally and 35 vertically, so if you're using an A5 journal you might have to adjust it a little bit. And that is it for these first 2 pages, so let's move on to the next one. This page will be dedicated to my habit trackers, and nothing has really changed for this one, so I first just made a title, and I wanted to include the pattern again, so I taped off some sections on the sides, and then just added the pattern inside, but I wanted to make everything a bit smaller so that it fits a bit better into those small sections. I also used the felt tip side of the markers for the leaves so that I have a bit more precision. To finish off the pattern, I added those small white lines again, and then I just peeled off the tape all around. Next, I used the gray again as a background for the title, and I wrote habits on top in black to keep everything consistent. For my daily habits, I went for the same calendar style tracker that I've been using for the last couple of months. So I first colored in the background on top for the weekdays, and each day is going to be 3 spaces wide. Then I wrote the weekdays in black on top, and I just wrote the first 2 letters. And then for the trackers underneath, I used the light pink and the gray as a background for the dates. The light pink for the days from December and February, and then the light gray for everything else. Again, each day is 3 spaces wide and 3 spaces tall, and the first line of each row will be used for the dates. Then I just made the borders in black, and then I also wrote down the dates on top with the gray. The way this tracker works is I will add a small color code below, and then I will assign each habit one of my colors, and then whenever I complete a habit I will color in a circle in the according color, and then at the end of the month I kind of have a visual representation of how often I completed each habit. Then, like I mentioned, I created my small color code underneath the calendar, so I chose the 4 colors that I used for this setup, and then I wrote down my habits. So this month I'm tracking getting up around 9 AM, planning my day in my bullet journal, doing some sort of movement or stretching, and keeping my screen time below 4 hours because I kind of want to try to reduce it a bit this year. As always, I'm also adding some weekly habits on the bottom, so first I used the light gray again as a background, and then I'm writing my habits on top in black. I'm tracking my same weekly habits as always, so making my weekly spreads, having a self-care day, doing my weekly reset, and working out 1 or 2 times per week. To track them, I added 5 circles, 1 for each week next to them, that I can fill out once I completed them, or cross them out if I didn't do them. There was a little bit of space on the right side left, so I just taped off the sides again and added a tiny pattern to tie it in with the rest of the spread, and also just to make the layout look a bit more interesting. Lastly, I'm making a much more compact weekly spread this time, so I'm only going to be using a single page, but I did get a comment about it recently, so I hope this was helpful. You could very easily make this into a double spread as well by just making the sections bigger, but everything else would be pretty much the same. First, I just added a small title on the top left, so I wrote week 1 and then I added another pattern section underneath to decorate the page a bit. Each section is going to be 10 spaces wide again, and the pattern is 5 spaces tall. This theme does look a lot more intricate, but the individual elements are super simple, and you could also use different colors and it would have a bit of a different vibe, so I feel like it's really versatile, and I also really love how it turned out because usually I kind of struggle a lot with winter themes. For my daily sections, I first colored in a circle in the top left with a light gray, and it's 2 by 2 spaces so that I can write the weekday and the date on top, and then I just wrote the first 2 letters of each day and the date underneath in black. Next, I added some small doodles in the bottom right corner again, and I switched between all of the 3 elements, so the blue leaves, the light pink leaves, and then the red berries, to just add a bit more color to the spread and break up the sections a bit. Lastly, I just added the borders again, and as for the sizing, the sections are 7 spaces tall, and again I left 2 spaces empty in between them horizontally and 1 space vertically. Anyway, that is it for this setup, so let's do a little flip through. This one is definitely a bit of a shorter one since there are less pages, but I'm actually super happy with how it turned out because there's a bit less empty space that's not really being used. So I hope you guys enjoyed it as well, and of course if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to my channel, and thank you so much for watching. I hope I'll see you again in my next video. Bye!